Welcome everyone. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Oh, hang on, let's record. Oh, we got recording. All right, good. Just wanted to make sure we're recording. Excellent. For those of you who do not wish to be recorded, that's not really an option for this call because we need to record it in order to be able to get all the dialogue and to make the blogs that we create after each call. So maybe change your name if you don't want to be revealed on screen. Otherwise, we will roll. Awesome. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā kātou katoa. Welcome, welcome to this place. Welcome to this place here with us. Welcome to Bloom Network's themed call for the month of October 2020. I am Hannah Mitchell, Community Support for Bloom and calling in from New Zealand. I'm helping host this call today. So this month we are here to discuss DISCOs. DISCO stands for Distributed Cooperative Organizations. It is a way to organize an organization in order to create communities of mutual value exchange. DISCOs recognize and support the importance of labor that nurtures people and the commons alongside any particular mission or product. This framework stems from the peer-to-peer movement and work of the Guerrilla Translation Collective. DISCOs are a playful, artful, feminist alternative to the patriarchal and top-down economies we're familiar with. And you'll hear all about it from our guest, Lisha Sterling, our fabulous guest in a moment. You know, I practiced that name, but you think you'd fumble it in the moment. Lisha Sterling, thank you,
Just
Lisha.
be glad that you weren't trying to say Elisheva Sterling, because nobody can pronounce that.
Except for you, obviously.
Yeah, well, me, Hebrew speakers, and some Spanish speakers seem to be able to get it right, but...
Awesome. So we'll give Lisha a proper introduction in a moment, but I'm just going to run quickly through what Bloom Network is and then do our welcome meditation to settle us all into this space, just for those of you who are not familiar with what Bloom Network is up to. So our mission is to connect and support regenerative culture makers with a vision of where resources are equitably distributed and accessible. We think of ourselves as a media company which is rooted in and led by local chapters who are doing real world actions to make a difference in climate change and social equality. We're helping educate people about regenerative systems that will allow all life to flourish in harmony with the Earth's cycles. And we know that there are so many of these regenerative ideas and models out there already. And so Bloom Network is amplifying this knowledge so that the concepts and new ways of being and doing are adopted faster around the world. So in short, we like to think of Bloom as a verb, helping shift people from an extractive mindset to a regenerative one. So if you haven't joined our newsletter already, you can join that in the chat. I'll just pop that there. This particular call is a monthly theme call which rotates 6 topics through the year. So we do it twice a year. This is the second time that we've been doing future economies this year, and that's our plan, is to cycle through these topics twice yearly so that we all get familiar with what they're all about and help connect all the movement leaders around the world, and so that we can kind of learn all this stuff together. If you want to learn more about what Bloom is and what local Bloom chapters are, you can join us on the last Thursdays of every month, where we will do an introduction to Bloom and have a general hangout in something that we call Bloom Buds. So before we dive into the themed call, let's just take that moment that we like to do together to open with a short meditation and acknowledgement of country. So take some time now to ground and settle yourself. Take your hands off your keyboard, pop them in your lap or on your desk, and get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes for just this moment. And start to slow down your breathing. So we're going to do like a visualization meditation this morning. Picture in your mind a natural setting that feels like home to you. It might be a river you feel a strong affinity with, a tree whose trunk you just love to hug, or that it reminds you of your own strength. A beach that feels like your spiritual home, or maybe a mountain that connects deeply with your soul. So imagine that beautiful landscape in your mind now and place yourself in it. Imagine being in this place, drinking in the sounds and the feelings of being in this natural wonderment. What smells are there? Is there moisture or salt in the air? Is there shade or sun on your face? What other creatures are with you? What life is blooming from the earth? What life is aloft in the sky? Feel into this space. Feel your toes feeling the earth. Have you got grass under there? Is it soil? Is it snow? Feel into this space and feel your connection with it. This is a space that you have a strong connection with, a strong connection to the earth. And that is very special. Hold on to that and grow that. In grounding your connection now to the lands that you know, we turn to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are calling in from. For they too have strong connections to the land. We recognize these people, acknowledge the country, the lands and their connections, broken and unbroken. We pay our respects to elders past and present across all the lands of the earth, and give our respect to the emerging leaders of the future. May our work together support them. May this deep connective wisdom be embodied. And may we move forward together. So with your eyes closed now, take a final breath in. Breathe in that beautiful connection that you have to the earth, to the land that your feet are on, to your favorite space in the world, and to all the spaces that you inhabit. And ground yourself in these places now as we welcome us all into this call. So, tēnā koutou, tēnā kātou katoa. Welcome, welcome to this place. Welcome to this place here with us. It's beautiful to be here in this space with so many wonderful people. We're here to learn and dance to disco. I'm going to hand over to Magenta now, the executive creative director of Bloom Network, who is going to frame the discussions that we will have to get together today and introduce Lisha.
Hi. Let's see. So we're gonna talk about discos, and mostly I think Lisha will just be giving us an intro to what they are and how to start one, and probably some of why they exist. Bloom Network is an example of one, and hopefully we'll hear about some other examples. And yeah, we came across discos in the course of looking for organizational structures that allow us to do like commons care work. Bloom Network has always been kind of in between, like something like a nonprofit or a corporation or like a just grassroots decentralized effort. And it's been a little bit difficult to plug in with the existing institutional structures for those things because of how we see the need to address the gaps between those structures, where a lot of projects that are organizing in decentralized ways or caring for each other and community are kind of left out of these systems a lot of times. When we came across discos, we were like, oh, yay, someone has really articulated this well and in such a fun way. So I'll just hand it over to Lisha here, a quick bio. Lisha is the executive director at Geeks Without Bounds, a nonprofit humanitarian organization of technologists, first responders, policymakers, and volunteers that work toward improving access to communication and technology. Their aim is to help people transform their bright ideas for humanitarian technology into sustainable living projects using open source technology. She organizes hackathons, manages the mentorship of teams in the Geeks Without Borders Accelerator, and she teaches coding, Linux administration, and cybersecurity skills to groups aged 11 and up. Lisha has made education about cyber risks and mitigation a core element of her life work. And her specialties include cybersecurity, digital forensics, open source software, application architecture, internationalization/localization, accessibility and usability. That's so awesome. So thanks so much for joining us, Lisha. And everyone, FYI, the flow of this call will be about a 15-minute presentation, followed by Q&A and discussion. And we'll close at about 1/4 past the hour. So I pass the floor over to you, Lisha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Can you pass me screen sharing capability, please? While I set my timer to make sure that I stay on track.
There, it should be working for you now.
Okay, cool. And I'll just
You don't need to stick to a finite time, Lisha.
Okay, I'll try to keep it pretty close though. So, all right, let's. I've been having a little bit of trouble with my desktop sharing lately, so let me know if you can see my desktop. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Okay, yay! All right. So this presentation is called "If I Only Had a Heart." If any of you went and looked up Disco, there's a sort of like a video teaser about discos. This is also the name of the disco teaser. The idea is that we want to make sure that we're putting the heart in, or keeping the heart in, the work that we do for our livelihood. So I want to just do one really quick, what the heck is Geeks Without Bounds, and what do I have to do with any of this? Because almost all the rest of the talk is about work that other people have done. So you might be left going, well, why is she doing this? So Geeks Without Bounds is a nonprofit that supports civic and humanitarian open source projects. The reason open source is so important to us is that a project that is developed to solve a challenge in one place or time can then be forked so that it can be used by others with slightly or very different needs. And by keeping everything open source, it helps reduce the development time and the development costs for other similar and related projects. We run hackathons, which, if you're familiar with the idea of hackathons as they've become in the last few years, people think of them as these competitions with big prizes. We really stick to the original version of hackathons, which is really about a volunteer opportunity to work on open source projects and move them forward. And we also use that very much to bring new people into existing projects. So it's not just about inventing something new over the weekend that you're going to forget forever, but actually taking a long-term approach to the work that we're doing across many hackathons. We have an accelerator program that helps mentor project teams to take a project from its initial prototype idea through to figuring out how they're going to become sustainable, and hopefully finding them some sort of funding source or other way to be able to continue doing their work. And we also do deployment support, where we actually go into the field to help take the technology that's been developed through this process and put it into action, whether that's setting up wireless mesh networks in places that have no access to wired internet, or whether that's taking a water system maintenance tool and helping deploy that across an entire country so that people can use their phones to let their local water companies know that there's a problem with the water pipes somewhere between a well and their public water point. So what we have to do with the disco is that we have an affinity for the project in general, because we're an organization that legally we're a nonprofit in Washington state, so we can't legally be called a cooperative. There's only one state in the US where a nonprofit can be a nonprofit cooperative under sort of its legal definition. But internally, we have always functioned as a worker organized, worker managed collaborative project. So we have a tight affinity to the whole idea of everything that we're about to talk about in terms of cooperatives, in terms of care work and love work, and also in terms of supporting different projects to be independent and work together in federations. And so Stocko and the crew with Guerrilla Media Collective tapped us to help out with developing the software to make discos run. So that's why I'm here and how I'm connected to all this. So we're going to explore technology, care work, and distributed cooperative organizations. So when you think about your brain is a network, right? But we're also, whether we're talking about the earth and its network of life, or whether we're talking about businesses and economies, there are many different kinds of networks and all of the connections between us. And these days we also have our computer networks that are spreading into every aspect of our life, whether that's the Internet of Trouble, the Internet of Things, or just websites, Zoom calls. Everything we do is now connected digitally online as well. We need a cooperative, feminist, commons-oriented alternative to DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. So why do we say that? So the DAOs are based on blockchain technology. You program your contracts, and then the contracts that are programmed basically manage your organization, right? And there is a techno-utopian or a techno-optimistic idea that if we can program things correctly, that we don't have to trust each other as humans. A lot of the things that have been written and discussed about anything touching the blockchain is about creating zero trust situations. You don't have to trust anybody because it's all handled algorithmically. But we start from a point of view that it's a bit too much to trust the algorithm, because even the algorithms are created by humans. And B, that not only can we trust other humans, but we actually need to trust other humans. So how do we combine the need for trusting humans with the reality that humans aren't always trustworthy? And so part of the answer to that is to have sort of different spheres of influence. Distributed cooperative organizations would be DCOs, but that is really boring. And very much not in the spirit of the way that we work or think. And so, of course, we're discos because we like to dance. What kind of a revolution would it be without a disco ball? So you can find out a lot more about everything I'm going to talk about at disco.coop, including the manifesto and links to the wiki that explains in much more depth what discos are all about, how they work, how you could start one, and how you can get connected with us if you'd like to become a pilot and help us with our research that is ongoing. So the disco's DNA combines 4 main elements. There's the commons peer-to-peer element. That discos are self-organized systems that steward resources to meet human needs while leveraging the power of networks. The disco DNA is also connected to open co-ops, combining open source and commons principles with the cooperative and social solidarity movements. Also, open value accounting enables value sovereignty by rewarding meaningful contributions to projects rather than just wage labor. And the other piece is feminist economics, because we need to challenge the ordinary economic abstractions that ignore reproductive and care work or devalue them. So I'm not going to talk too much about how we go from platform co-ops to open co-ops to discos, except to say that if you don't already know about platform cooperatives, they're cooperatively owned, democratically governed businesses that are established with a computing platform, and they have a website or a mobile app or some other kind of protocol that facilitates the sale of their goods and services. So basically, it's a cooperative organization that has a digital layer. So in one way, discos are similar to that because we are using software as a layer to help us with our trade among discos and also managing the value flows within a given disco. So traditional, this slide is kind of weird because it looks like it's saying traditional cooperatives are greater than platform cooperatives or greater than open cooperatives, but no, it's like we go from one to the other to the next, and we hope that discos are going to be the new generation. In traditional cooperatives, workers have ownership and control. In the platform cooperatives, you add a digital platform or some form of digital economy. In open cooperatives, there's a purpose for the cooperative, but the cooperative is commons itself, and it also adds an open source layer. So what I was talking about before about the value of open source really comes into play with the open cooperatives. But discos add on top of that the notion of care work and open value accounting and distributed ledger technologies. So the DLTs part is kind of how we're connected with the DAO or with DAOs. Discos arose from a community of practice, which is the Guerrilla Media Collective. I often call the GMC sort of the disco. So these are the folks in the Guerrilla Media Collective. They are best known for their translation work, but they also do digital media work and design work as well. The initial co-op is a translating co-op that's been alive for about 8 years. And somewhere around 3 years ago, they sort of changed up the way that they were working, and at the same time added 2 other pieces to their cooperative. So 2 other sort of organizations that were under the umbrella of the Guerrilla Media Collective. In each one of these sub-organizations, people would work on the projects, the livelihood projects. They would work on the care work that makes it possible to even have an organization. And they would also do what they call love work, which allows them to do work that adds to the available commons in the world. So for the translation team, an example of that is that they see a text that they think should be available in a language that they can translate into. And so they might reach out to the publisher and or the author to get permission. And then they can translate that for free and make it publicly available for free. So the people in that group are Anne-Marie, Brana, Laura, Sarah, Sylvia, Stocko, and Timothy. And I told you all of that stuff. This is what the Guerrilla Translation website looks like, and I highly recommend, there's a link at the end of this presentation. I recommend going and checking it out because there are a lot of really interesting articles that they've translated into English and into Spanish as needed, just around a lot of the concepts that I know that the Bloom Network is interested in. So the DISCO framework is based on the governance model that was developed for Guerrilla Translation and the Guerrilla Media Collective. And so I explained this a little bit. There's pro bono work, which is your love credits. There's the agency work, which they call the livelihood credits. And there's the care work. Whoops, there's not a picture for the care work, sorry. So one thing about this is that they want to make sure that everybody gets paid for all of their hours, including those love work hours. So what they have done is they've set up sort of an equation of how many hours within a given week or a given month you put into each of these buckets. And if you put more into one of those buckets, then that rolls over to your next cycle. So you might do more love work this month, but then next work you top up your care work or you top up your livelihood work. The livelihood work is the work that's bringing the money into the organization and paying for everything else that's going on. So the model value tracks commons-oriented pro bono work, ethical market livelihood work, and the care and reproductive work for a fair distribution of income. The 7 DISCO principles are that they are statutorily oriented towards the common good. This might also just be said, you know, it statutorily makes it sound like it's legally required. So you might think of a B Corp in the United States, but not every jurisdiction is going to have something like a B Corp. So you write it into your bylaws, you write it into the DNA of your organization that you're going to be oriented towards the common good. It's multi-stakeholder in nature. So who are the stakeholders in your organization? Yes, it's the workers, but it's also the people who are receiving your services or your products, that they have some say or some input into what you're doing. We actively co-create the commons. We want to put more things out into the world that everybody has access to. People on this call might be familiar with the food is free movement. That is an example, right? Food could be totally free. There's lots of stuff growing all around me that most people don't even realize is food. But we've turned it into monocrop agricultural economy, right? So some people grow food or pick wild food and put them in baskets in front of their house with a sign saying food is free and anybody can take that food. So that's an example of taking something that has been pulled completely into a monetary economy and putting it back into the commons. Number 4, discos are locally embedded, but they're globally oriented. An example of this is how the Guerrilla Media Collective has translated and published books in the past. And when they publish a book and they make it available internationally, they coordinate with different printers in different parts of the world so that things can be printed locally and shipped a shorter distance instead of shipping from everywhere to everywhere in the world from, say, Spain. So there's a global network, but each piece of the global network is locally oriented.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Guzman, and I am a senior at Columbia Secondary School. And this is our app. Think about it. This app was developed in high school and college students.
In the background.
There we go.
I can't figure out where it's coming from. Okay.
They just muted themselves. You're good.
Okay. I was worried that it was a video running in the background that I couldn't find. It's like, oh no, what have I done? All right. So number 5, centered on care work. So we want to make sure that we recognize the care work that goes into making the organization work. Now, a lot of that is administrative work, but it also involves taking the time to make sure that everybody within the disco is physically and mentally healthy. As an example of that, just this last week, our regular weekly meeting that we have on Tuesday mornings ended up being 3 of us just kind of doing mental health support for each other. And it was really, really supportive. And we came out of it with, you know, to-do lists for each of us, but it really helped us be able to do the work. So new origins and flows of value. An example of this is some of what we're doing with the software right now. With discos, the idea is that each individual disco is a group of anywhere from 2 to 20 people, but preferably not more than 20 people. And the reason I was mentioning before with DAOs, that a DAO puts all the trust in the algorithm and none of the trust in the people. And with a disco, you really want to have as much trust as possible in your local group that you're working with, right? But the disco is distributed cooperative organizations in federation. So you might know your, 15 best friends that you're working with on a daily basis, and you have a high level of trust with them. And so you have a way of managing the income and the values that you have together. But when you're doing trade or doing larger cooperative projects with another disco, you're not going to know them as well. You're going to have a different level of trust with them. So you're going to put more of that into those sort of digital contracts, and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to trade. And those trades might not be dollars money or euros money. You might be trading with each other based on, the value of bananas or the value of an hour of massage therapy or, some other value. And one of the ideas here is that we can create different types of economy or tap into the many different types of economies that already exist for these different cooperative partnerships. And we're primed for federation, which goes right back to what I was just talking about having your local disco and also being connected with all of these other groups that are also discos and being able to do exchanges and work collaboration across. If you'd like to learn more about this, check out disco.coop/manifesto. There's a sort of short version, and then there's a much longer version, which comes in several chapters. You can follow all of the disco stuff, disco.coop. You can get general information at hello@disco.coop. If you'd like to reach out to Stocko, he's at stocko@stocko.works, and Anne-Marie is Anne-Marie@disco.coop. You can find them on Twitter at @StockoP2P or @AMU Tratel. Stocko.works is Stocko's personal blog. The GorillaTranslation.org is the website that I was telling you about that has all those really fantastic articles that you might find interesting. CommonsTransition.org is a really fantastic primer on different types of commons platforms, different ways to do cooperative organization. And I honestly have no idea what freefairandalive.org is. I did not put that in the slides, but I left it in because it's probably interesting. I just haven't had time to look. And if you'd like to sign up for the Commons newsletter, it's at commonstransition.org/newsletter. And if you'd like to follow me or Geeks Without Bounds, we're at gwob.org. You can email info@guab.org to get a hold of anybody in our core team to ask a general question. If you'd like to reach me, I'm Lisha@guab.org. My Twitter is @LishaVita, and Guab's is @guab.org. So, any questions?
Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have questions. I have a few on my end, but happy to hear from more folks here too. Thank you so much, Lisha, for that wonderful introduction.
Hi, Lisha. Yes, definitely. Thank you for that. That was great. And I have a question. So outside of the initial organization, have there been other organizational use cases that you might be able to describe?
So that is part of what we're working on right now. I can actually say this now. For weeks, I've been going, I can't tell you what's going on. I'm so excited. But today the announcement was put out that the Guerrilla Media Collective received a grant from Grant for the Web to run a number of pilot projects and develop training materials and also a research paper about how these pilots are developing. And Geeks Without Bounds has gotten a Grant for the Web grant in order to build the software that I was talking about earlier. So that was actually just announced today. So in the pilot programs, let me see if I can remember the pilot programs. So Cooperation Jackson is doing a pilot program. Mondragon, in Spain, they are running a pilot program in connection with the Mondragon University. And I think that they're also doing a pilot program with one of their web development teams, if I understand correctly. I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this, but Lynn and Bob, who are both on this call, might know better. They are also part of the software team. They were actually working on the software for Disco before I came along. So I should have mentioned them earlier, but I was like so focused on the slides that I did not write myself. So I was like, do I have everything? So Lynn or Bob, if you guys can think of other pilots that that are in the Disco project.
I don't know of other ones formally in, so I guess we might be the wrong people.
Okay. So in Zimbabwe, I also know that there's a hacker space called Multi-Talented Makerspace that is sort of in the early stages of establishment right now, and they are also establishing themselves from the beginning as a disco. So the answer is kind of a yes and no. Yes, in the sense that there are these projects that are just starting out to pilot the project. No, in the sense that nobody else has really done this for any prolonged period of time yet.
Oh, thank you for that. And yeah, I'd love to dig into the nuts and bolts and hear what's happening. So is there like a constitution or a GitHub site that has, like in Spiral, you know, has all their information up? Is there any of that that's ready yet? And when you mentioned software for Disco, what would the software do?
So there are several different pieces of what the software is doing. So the main part that I'm focused on right now is the way that I think of it as just an accounting. It's an accounting software that is very specifically tailored to discos, that is built in a distributed manner on top of something called Commons Pub. If you're familiar with Activity Pub, Commons Pub is built on top of Activity Pub, and we're using Commons Pub together with Interledger to create an accounting software that also can move value around, so that both within a single disco you can manage like units of value, whether that's widgets that have been made or man hours worked or whatever your widgets of value are, with whatever the exchange for that is, whether you're paying in bananas or Bitcoin or euro or dollars or whatever. So that software, the reason that it needs to be something other than just off the shelf currently existing software is because it allows the individual disco to define its governance and its value equations, and then using that disco's value equations, it decides where money goes. So for example, in the case of Guerrilla Media Collective, they have a percentage, so that every month when you get paid, a percentage of your hours are love work, a percentage of your hours are care work, and a percentage of your hours are livelihood work. But what if your work that month is not from those, in those same divisions? So the software needs to be able to adjust so that the extra love work you did this month, you're not going to get paid for that in love work credits this month, but that goes into future love work credits. So in another month, you might do more of some other kind of work. Does that make sense? So, I mean, one work I might do all love work, and then the next month I do all livelihood work, and the month after that I'm doing all care work, but the software understands, you know, what the split is, and makes sure that across a period of time you are evened out according to their equation. Does that make sense? So other pieces of software that are not part of this grant, but that we're also working on, are basically an open source tool that will help teams to do their collaborative work. We're building it on top of Nextcloud, which gives you something kind of like the Google Apps environment, where you've got email and you've got you know, your shared documents and things like that. So this is sort of an open source replacement for Trello, an open source replacement for whiteboarding software, an open source replacement for your Google Drive, all of those things. So we're not necessarily writing huge amounts of code from scratch for that. What we're doing is we're taking existing open source tools and writing the plugins so that they'll work together with Nextcloud.
Nice. Are you envisioning a new Disco specifically to maintain what's being put together?
Software? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's part of sort of the long-term work of what Geeks Without Bounds needs to do on this project, is we need to you know, get a team formulated that can handle the tech side of this and help get them sustainably set up for the long run, so that they'll be able to continue to do that work after we get past this, you know, grant phase.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I have a question. I don't know if you hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, I basically understood everything you say, I think. My question is, in the idea of replication, I think in Ethereum, like this template that others can use to, you know, so what is your idea of like a starter kit, or like something that you can start to offer in a white label or something, so people like me in other countries without that team can also use it?
So part of the software that handles what I was calling just accounting software before, right? So the first thing that you do when you are setting up that software is you go through a process to describe your governance model and your economic flows within your own local disco, right? And the way that you do that is using this really nice drag and drop interface that basically gives you all these possibilities that you can kind of play with, see what it looks like, and then agree on between your group. There are also several templates of like, these are things we already know work. And hold on a second, because my brain just went totally dead and I can't. Community rule.info is the name of the software that we are forking for that. So if you'd like to get an idea of what I'm talking about, Community Rule is designed to help you write bylaws, your governance model. So we're taking that and we're expanding it to also deal with the value flows. So that will give any group of people sort of an easy entree to be able to say, oh, these are different kinds of governance models. These are different ways that we can manage the value flows. We want to tweak it like this. We want to tweak it like that. And then once they have that, that goes into two places. One is it prints out a human readable version of that you can put on your wiki or your website, whatever. And then a machine readable version that goes to manage your accounting.
Hello.
Hi, Kyle.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for your presentation. And thank you to the Bloom Network for organizing this and all the work they're doing. I came across two projects today that I think I don't know, might be relevant to your work or where this could go, how it could be replicated and grow. I took part, or I followed an online conference called FinTech in I think it's in Washington. They're talking about cryptocurrency and stablecoin and all these things that I'm learning about now. And there was a woman in one panel named Fenny Wang, and she's a lawyer who's doing some Dionysus labs, and she's working with the Red Cross, I think in Liberia, and they've introduced a local currency, blockchain-based currency, and there's over $1 million in circulation already. And she said that this money has circulated in 9 months. It's multiplied or circulated through the economy of where it's been introduced 11 times. And so I'm wondering if discos have a place in that environment, in that, because they're trying to give financial tools to the people who are the poorest, in the model of the Grameen Bank. The other project I came across just shortly after is a project called the Alliance for Prosperity from the CELO Foundation. It involves the Libra and Ripple, which has cross-border exchange, allowing money to move, less friction, lower cost, and they have their own stable coin. They gave 10 million to this project, the Alliance for Prosperity, to do the same thing, create, to allow, to give access to these financial instruments in the model of the Grameen Bank. And I'm just wondering if it seems to me that there could be a natural fit there. Are you aware of these projects, and do you see a way that your work could dovetail with what they're doing?
So the answer broadly is yes. The answer more specifically is that there are some tweaks to this that will be needed in some localities. So for instance, in Tanzania, the software that we worked on called Taarifa to help manage the maintenance of the public water system in Tanzania, the whole system ran off of SMSs because most people don't have smartphones. Most people in rural areas, I should say, don't have smartphones. And so the people who most needed to be able to communicate with the software, everything that they were doing, they use feature phones, and they use SMS for banking. They use SMS to pay their phone bills. They use SMS for everything. So using it to interact with their water system is a logical next step. I am going to guess, and this is a semi-educated guess and may be completely wrong, that the project in Liberia is probably running something similar, where there's what in effect is a web server, but instead of talking to people through a web page or a mobile app, that people can interact with it using SMS, because that is pretty much the most common model for these types of tools in most of Africa at this point. So because of that sort of slight difference in the user interface, in order to be usable in some of the most low resource communities, we would need to build an interface that would work with the tools that people actually have in their hands and have in their pockets. Would that be a fantastic thing? Absolutely. Would it be outrageously difficult to add that capability to the software that we're building right now? No, actually, it wouldn't be. It's just sort of another interface layer. So all of the back end stuff would be the same. and we would just add another interface layer if we were working with communities that use those sorts of tools. Does that answer your question? Oh, also the blockchain question. So part of the reason that we're using Interledger as sort of the tool for moving the monetary part around in all of this is because Interledger allows you to make payments through a whole range of different tools, whether that's Ethereum or Bitcoin or, you know, Visa card or, you know, or some other thing. Basically, Interledger allows you to plug in to nearly any currency type that might be out there.
Is that
So
well
that's how that-
established? Is that a large organization? Is that a...
So Interledger is actually, so I think that it was originally a project from Mozilla, but it is an open source standard, and it's part of what the Grant for the Web is about making Interledger more available or more used. It exists, it is a standard, it's a thing that can be used, but not that many people are using it yet. So part of what the Grant for the Web is about is getting that into more people's hands, onto more websites, and popularizing its use.
Wow, and would that, if that took off and was very well designed and engineered, would that be a competitor to, would that be in the same genre as Polkadot or Cosmos?
I don't know.
Because those are environments that I understand where it's a network that allows you to conduct business and transact in a variety of tokens or cryptocurrencies. It's like an internet of
Yeah, so honestly, I don't know. It's possible that Interledger is what's making those guys work. That might be what's under the hood. I don't know. I haven't looked into either of them. So they may be their own proprietary version of what Interledger is doing. And Interledger is an open source tool and an specification. So so I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Poppy's giving a couple answers in the chat too, just to.
I feel so not alone as a nerd right now. We have about 15. Yay! We have it looks like about 12 minutes left for the call. So it's been a lot of information between the questions and presentation too. So I just want to do a practice real quick with everybody that we learned from some folks out of Australia. They do a project called Dragon Dreaming. And there's a word, I think it's maybe an Australian Aboriginal word, Pinakari. And it's just an invitation to be like presence with our bodies and just take a moment of silence. It just seemed like it might help us all to take a breath together, just because it is a lot of information. So I invite us to just do like a quick minute of silence and then dive back into the questions. I'll let us know when it's been a minute. And invite us all to take one deep breath together. All right, back to questions. Thanks.
If I can jump in. I really like that presentation. Thank you, Lisa. I am really excited to watch this video, Blockchain, the Crypto Feminist Agenda. I'm kind of a newcomer to the DAO space. I actually ran into Magenta in a DAO hackathon thing over the summer. And so I've been kind of learning about that space a lot and getting involved in some different projects. And the comments around trust is really interesting, I think, in blockchain in general, because of this trustless layer, and then the fact that we're all humans trying to coordinate, and humans necessarily like require trust and all that stuff. And I think there's a lot of like interesting dynamics there. But in terms of creating another platform to offer a different view compared to DAOs, do you feel like that diverging platform might miss some of the innovations that happen in that DAO space in terms of innovative ways to vote and you know, participate? Like, I don't know, it seems like there's maybe a fundamental divergence of philosophy, and I think it is super healthy to have multiple visions of how decentralized communities can work. But like, how, like, I don't know if you have any thoughts, maybe just generally on like kind of how sharing happens, you know, with ideas, and how you plan to kind of adapt and bring more tools in and stuff.
So I'd recommend that you take a look at that communityrule.info, because I think that might give you kind of an answer on the question about like innovations around voting and innovations around governance models. Like those sorts of things sort of have an inherent way to move their way into discos as well, since when you set up your own disco, or even if you as a disco sit and go like, hey, this part of our governance isn't working, let's try something else, like a core part, the very first thing that you do in order to set it up is go through the process of figuring out how you vote, you know, what are the means and manners of governance, and who are the stakeholders and who are the voters, and etc. So that part I'm very not worried about losing touch, in as much as you know, all of the blockchain technologies that are underpinning the DAO is open source, and therefore, you know, potentially forkable or potentially plug-inable. I'm not worried about losing the benefits of those, because as I said before, it's entirely possible to build a disco sort of, it's like disco DAO, right? It's a disco dance. You can build something where the way that you're handling it is by passing all of this information into what is essentially a DAO, right? But the part of the piece of this that I think the DAOs miss is the human iteration, and the human trust part within the smaller group. So within a DAO, there's basically no direct human to human trust needed, supposedly, right? Because everything is managed through the digital contracts. Whereas here, your first your first point of contact is that trustful relationship you have with your coworkers, which I think, I hope, and we'll see as the pilots go through, I think that that will actually generate more possibilities for experimentation, because you can iterate on trying things out if you don't have to program every new thing in a big way, if you've got a small way to program it, right? So, and that's kind of what the community rule piece gives us, is it gives us a way for you to say as a group, oh no, we want to change this around and change this around and change this around, and then publish that into your tools, and now your tools will use those changes you just made. So you can iterate, try things out, experiment, and keep moving forward without having to like fully rewrite your contracts. So I think that there's definitely some opportunity for both direction learning.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. I know that was just a really general thought I had and stuff, comparing the two models, but it is really interesting to think about, you know, where these things take us. So thanks for your comments and your time.
Yeah, as we're setting up our DAO, kind of working through the challenges right now of how to even map onto a DAO, because we have done really deep governance work to set up Bloom to do basically like restorative justice governance in terms of power dynamics. And we've also found that we need to be really careful about gatekeeping or like vetting people who are in leadership positions as kind of a community security reason on a lot of fronts. So that's, yeah, it's a little bit challenging to figure out how to plug in with the DAO space, but I'm really happy to hear it. Listening to all this has helped me learn better how to navigate, like kind of sitting between these different communities and helping work with and learn from as people build these sorts of things out. So just huge thank you to Lisha and everyone here involved with Discos. And I know there are many people involved with similar overlapping cooperative economic innovation stuff. So just, yeah, really big hug to you all for the dedication and labor and like really beautiful gifts that you are weaving in the world. And I wish all of us really beautiful mutual support and care as this continues to come into the world between everybody.
So was it Magenta or Hannah who said you had a question right at the beginning?
Oh, I had a few questions. Maybe Hannah, do you think we have time to like ask one Bloom question and then go to close?
Yeah, well, I definitely also want to ask who here wants to, who's new, who wants to start up a disco as well.
Yeah, let's just go for it. If anyone needs to drop off, go ahead and drop off. We'll just go a few more minutes here. I was gonna ask, when I was going through, Stocko had sent over a worksheet for some prompts to make sure like that your cooperative is working in accordance with 7 principles of a disco. And it was interesting reading through the difference between the types of work, because I think I discovered that pretty much all of the labor in Bloom Network is care work. Like, it's not like we have a straightforward kind of service model. It's a little bit more squishy ecosystem, like people become a member and we're like figuring out as you go along. So I was just curious if there are other groups that are forming as discos that do primarily just care work or like commons oriented labor.
So one of the ways that I think about this that's a little bit different from how Stocko thinks about it and how he defines it is that livelihood work is the work that you're getting paid to do, the work that pays into your organization, right? So if your organization gets grants, then what is it that the grants are paying for, right? So I know for Geeks Without Bounds, we have certain work that our grants are paying for and other work that our grants specifically don't pay for. So either somebody does volunteer work to get that work done, or we find some creative way to make that work, like, you know, magically get paid for. So within the disco sense, the work that the grant is directly paying for, that's our livelihood work. That's the work that brings money into the organization. And the care work is the work that is necessary for Geeks Without Bounds to just exist, right? That isn't necessarily paid for by those grants. And then the love work is the work that we're doing in the world sort of on a volunteer basis that isn't covered by any kind of grants and that isn't directly allowing Geeks Without Bounds to exist, to continue to be this container. Does that explain or clear it up?
A little bit. I mean, specific to Bloom, like we're having a really hard time getting grants too. So I don't know if other co-ops are in that phase of, maybe it's like an equivalent would be like a bootstrapping phase where you don't quite have a revenue stream or something yet. I mean, I kind of understand how to plug in with the framework.
That's also that's also something that that Stocko has talked a lot about. Like in the early period when you don't yet have work that's bringing money in, you are going to be doing all of this administrative care work just to make the organization exist. And so the way that the Guerrilla Media Collective handles that is, well, we don't have any money to pay for this, but track all of your hours anyway. Track your hours and keep track of whether you're doing care work or whether you're doing love work. And then once the money comes in, you start getting paid for that back work. Not all in one go, because that would bankrupt the organization, but you get paid for it according to that, what I was talking about before, where you've got different percentages that you get paid each month, right? So in your pay packet, X% will be from that care work that you did back then. Does that make sense? So you still get paid for that eventually, it just comes down the line later. And then
thank you, that's really helpful.
The way that Guerrilla Media Collective has dealt with that in part is also looking at how much money is coming in, how much can they afford to pay this month, and then, okay, so we can pay you X amount, and of that we're paying this many hours from this bucket, this many hours from this bucket, this many hours from that bucket. So that might, the actual pay packet might grow or shrink, but the percentages will continue to be the same.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Yeah, there's a lot of projects in our network that are in that kind of phase. So thank you so much for breaking that down.
Yeah.
And thank you for that question. And so I have a follow-up question to that. How does that work when people come into the organization and then leave the organization? So does that carry forward for eventual payment
yes.
at some point?
I mean, theoretically, different discos might handle that differently, right? If a specific disco has a savings account that has the money to pay off somebody completely when they leave, that's, you might call that part of their severance package, is that they get paid all that back pay all at once, right? So, it's perfectly reasonable that somebody might set that up in their disco, that's how they're going to handle it because they have the finances to do it. Whereas with another disco, the cooperative may decide the way that we're going to handle this is you're going to continue to get monthly paychecks until we've paid you all off for all of the hours that you have outstanding, right? So either one of those options. And one of the ways that Stocko talks about that work that is unpaid at one point that eventually gets paid is that unpaid work is basically your investment into the organization. If you join Mondragon, it costs like 3,000 euros to join Mondragon, right? And you either have to pay that in cash or you have to take out a loan to pay for that to become a worker owner at Mondragon. At Guerrilla Media Collective, you do a certain number of hours of work that is not paid at the time that you're doing it, while you're getting trained and onboarded into all of the systems, but you're tracking all of that money. Once you're on board, now you start getting paid for that money as part of that packet. So it's sort of an investment in your future.
Right.
Also, in the case of the Guerrilla Media Collective, if their hourly pay goes up and you've still got hours in the bucket that haven't been paid, you're getting paid at the higher rate, not at the rate that it would have been back when you did the work, which is one of the reasons why it's worthwhile to leave stuff in the bucket, because you might get paid more per unit of labor in the future.
Would they put the pay rate down at any point?
Oh Lord, I hope they never have such a sad thing. But I mean, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, you have to figure that could potentially happen. You know, I mean, if there was a Great Depression or something like that, and there was no funding coming in, the group might make a decision like that. I don't know if they have any agreements. I haven't read their economic agreements regarding that sort of thing, so I don't know about how they would handle that. But theoretically, for a disco, it could happen.
And mostly you handle this through like spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheet or something, that then when you actually do transactions, you stick it into QuickBooks or something like that?
So the way that they have been doing it in the past is all through spreadsheets. And that's part of why we're building this software, so that it doesn't have to be in spreadsheets. And the software will allow you to track the units of labor as well as the units of payment for labor.
In the meantime, do you make any samples of these spreadsheets available? I'm guessing that even creating them, you probably went through a number of iterations.
That is a really good question. I don't know if they have any of those things publicly available. I have some of their spreadsheets because I'm like, our specifications for the new software is building off of those spreadsheets, but I'm not sure if they have them publicly available on their wiki or not. I'll have to ask Stacco.
Right.
Can I ask, Lisha, you've kind of answered most of the questions I had on this, but I'm quite curious with the distinction between love and care work, because our organization's been looking into discos for a while, and your governance manual is one of the best bits of work I've seen in the topic. It's fantastic. But I'm quite curious how much of the split between love and care was an ideological intention that was quite strong, and how much is kind of a financial decision in terms of how people are reimbursed, and in particular, if love and care are reimbursed equally over time, or if one lags behind the other and there's less percentage awarded. Because I guess there's sort of these two strong schools in feminist thought of elevating care work, but also, you know, removing the distinction between care work and real work, quote unquote. So yeah, I'm quite curious how you arrived at these formulas.
So I am the wrong person to ask that, because Stacco or anybody at all in the Guerrilla Media Collective would be able to actually answer those questions better. I do know that the way that love work is handled within the Guerrilla Media Collective, that is pro bono work that they're doing. So it's the same work that they do as livelihood work, but that they're doing for free for a cause that they believe in, right? And there are some sort of general guidelines that their organization has of what that has to be, kind of in a broad general way, but any given person who's doing that pro bono work, they're picking their pro bono work. So it's aligned with their personal values or their personal desires to give out to the world, right? Excuse me. Whereas the care work is generally not the same work that the organization gets paid to do. It's all the other things that an organization needs to have happen so that it is possible to do that work that the organization gets paid to do. Does that help at all? As for the percentages of how they get paid, I can tell you that literally in the past month, that equation just changed at the Guerrilla Media Collective. So that is, I was gonna say iterative, but I would take that kind of another step and say that it's actually something that is agreed upon by the collective based on the needs of the collective at that time. And saying like, oh, these are the percentages that things should be paid in, period, the end, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that works for this group, right? But even though that works for this group today, it's not what worked 2 months ago, and we don't know if that's what's going to work a year from now. So any one group may have differences in what those are over time, and certainly different groups are going to make different decisions about how those things get paid out.
Great. I think that might be a good time to end or summarize what we've been going on here for. Thank you so much, Lisha. Your knowledge is awesome. And I really love that slideshow because it really showed this, particularly the one with the levels of co-op and what each one added. That was like super helpful for my brain. So
that was 100% the Guerrilla Media Collective. There were 2 slides on there that had anything that I put on there, and you can guess which 2 those were. All of the pretty slides and useful slides, that was Guerrilla Media Collective.
Well, thank you, Guerrilla Media Collective. And the reason why they're, well, obviously it's great to have Lisha here, who's working with them as well. But of course, the time difference between here and Europe is just too unwieldy to be able to have those peeps on at this particular time. So we really appreciate Lisha jumping in and giving us all the infos. We're really keen to continue talking to people who want to set up a disco. So if you're here on this call and you are interested in staying connected, particularly around being a disco, it might be best actually to drop your email address in the chat box for us so we can track your name and contact details. So if you want to set up a disco or continue this conversation, drop that info in there and we will follow up with you. I'm so excited by this model because the recognition of care in the economic environment has been lost so much, and to be able to come up with a different way of working that recognizes that is just incredibly special. And definitely, you know, it's great that we're on this horse and we're going there. We're going to find out how we can change that system. So I just keep thinking about, I've got some really some good friends here in my hometown who require full-time carers, and to have that recognized in a much more meaningful way is going to be a really great way that we are heading. So thank you everyone, and thank you for staying on to this call. If you are still here, let's just take a moment to breathe in all that beautiful energy and knowledge, and affirm the discussions that have been had today. Another breath. Affirm the learnings that have been going into your brain, and affirm the resolutions that you have made in learning these things and how you're going to fulfill them in the future. From our hearts of bloom to all of you around the world, thank you for being here today. And we'll see you next month on our introduction to the DAO that Bloom is releasing, which is very exciting. And if you want to hear more about local blooms, that's next Thursday afternoon. So thank you all. I'm Hannah Mitchell, and we've been joined by Magenta, who is our executive human, and Lisha Sterling. Thank you all for being here. Ka kite.
Thank you.
I love you all, and have a good day.